The room went frigid as soon as the lawyer had completed reading the will. Like a noose, the tension encircled us. When my mother got up, her immaculately manicured nails pressing into my stepfather's arm, I hadn't really started to deal with the loss of my grandfather. From now on, she declared, Benjamin will be in charge of the business. Benjamin, my stepfather. Just a year ago, my mother married this man. The same man who had been making subtle, condescending comments about me for the previous 6 months, saying things like, I'm too young, too naive, and too soft to understand anything important. He usually smiled when he spoke, but I could sense the abrasiveness in every syllable. I glanced around the room, waiting for a response. None of my aunts, uncles, or even the board members who had assembled for the reading, however, flinched. When their silence became unbearable, I saw that this had all been prearranged. Before my grandfather's burial had even lasted a week, they were already tearing apart his legacy like vultures. It was as if my mother's words were the last word in a secret agreement. However, her bold remark was not without flaw. The business, which was my grandfather's empire, was now mine. Only a week before his death, I recall sitting next to him in the hospital. Once steady and powerful, his hand felt papery and brittle in mine. His eyes were blazing, yet his voice was no more than a whisper. You're the only person I trust, Eva, he snarled. I suppressed tears as a lump formed in my throat, refrained from letting them take what I created. I had no idea what he meant at the moment. Now I do, he answered. They'll come for it. And don't be scared when they do. I have ensured that you are prepared. He had, too. The attorney brought everyone back to the present by clearing his throat. My mother waited for the legal confirmation of her announcement, while grinning smugly. However, the lawyer turned to face me rather than her. He started by saying, Mr. Whitmore's granddaughter, Eva Whitmore, is to inherit his entire estate, including all controlling shares in Whitmore Industries, in accordance with his final will and testament. Quiet. All the heads in the room jerked in my direction. It was a wave-like shock. Before the rage blossomed in my mother's eyes, she froze, her face going pale. That has to be an error, she yelled. It's not, the attorney said coolly. The only successor is Eva Whitmore. This is effective immediately, Benjamin chuckled. Like a man who believes he is seeing a child play dress-up, he laughed quietly and smugly. As patronizing as ever, he continued to me, You know that managing a business isn't like your college projects. This is true. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I suddenly realized that I was more than just a character in this story. I wrote it. As soon as the truth hit her, my mother's smile vanished. Her face contorted, not in bewilderment, but in rage. This is the type of rage that arises when you lose control. Get out if that's the case, she urged, her teeth tight. Get out of our house. I blinked. I briefly believed I had misheard her. I could see now that she was more than just stunned. She felt ashamed. She hadn't simply lost the business. I had defeated her. I took a quick look around the magnificent home, where I had spent every summer of my youth running through the corridors, sitting in the study, listening to my grandfather's stories, and watching the snow fall from the balcony on the second story. I gave her another glance and let out a little laugh. It was disbelief, not laughter. Our residence? I asked quietly. You mean the home of your grandfather? She tensed up. My words resonated deeply with her. With a firm voice, I added, You might want to take another look at that will, because I believe you will discover that this house is now also mine. The tension grew in the room. My mother's fists curled at her sides as her jaw clenched. At last, Richard, the man she had married and attempted to install as the new king of the corporation, was losing the arrogant sparkle in his eyes. He was observing the fragments disintegrating. This is absurd, my mother yelled, raising her voice. This is where our family lives. No, I responded coolly, meeting her gaze. It belonged to grandfather, and now I own it. Richard intervened at that point and tried his customary polished charm. You're young, Eva, he said, starting in a tone meant to seem fatherly, lacking experience. It takes more than simply inheritance to run a business like this. It has to do with accountability, pressure. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Oh, it was there. The plan itself was present. What was best for me wasn't the point here. It had never been. They had assumed that everything would pass to my mother. In order for Richard to take control of Whitmore Industries, while she sat comfortably in the passenger seat, she was expected to sign it over to him. They collaborated on this, and the barrier was me. I cocked my head slightly and crossed my arms. With a low, sharp voice, I said, "Let me get this straight. Mom tried to evict me from my house the moment you realized the business wasn't yours. Do you now want me to think that the two of you ought to be in command?" They didn't say anything. Not immediately. However, I noticed the mask breaking. "Do I appear that naive?" I added. There was a small lapse in Richard's smile. He muttered, "That's not what I'm saying." However, their damage control did not pique my curiosity. I turned to face the attorney. I remarked, "They planned this, did they not?" The attorney remained silent. He didn't have to. Already the truth was coming to light. There was silence in the room. My mother remained motionless and stunned, but she refused to give in. Richard's facade of charm had started to completely fall apart, exposing the resentment underlying. My mother's voice trembled with controlled anger as she abruptly stated, "You have no idea what you're doing. Eva, this isn't a personal triumph. The company has billions of dollars. You cannot simply assume the role of CEO because you were fortunate enough to inherit money." I didn't wince, I didn't blink. The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses as if he had been waiting for this very moment before I could respond. In fact, he said calmly, "Mr. Whitmore foresaw these issues." Everyone, including myself, looked at him. "What are you saying?" My mom lost her temper. "It indicates that Mr. Whitmore created a transition plan," the attorney said. "Eva won't be running the business by herself. A group of reliable advisors will guide Eva as she assumes her position as CEO. All legal paperwork is in order, and the board has already been informed." My chest began to feel lighter for the first time since I had entered the room. Grandpa had protected me in addition to believing in me. He made sure I wouldn't confront the storm without a lifeboat because he had anticipated it. Richard's face became sour. He leaned in my mother's direction and murmured something, but I heard him say, "Not enough. We can combat this." With the cool accuracy of someone who had fought 100 fights like this, the lawyer turned to face him. "It is not possible," he stated firmly. "The will is flawless. There is nothing to dispute legally." Checkmate. My mum appeared as if the earth had disappeared beneath her. For years, she had seen me as a frail inconvenience, someone to put on a show and ignore when making important decisions. Her goals were now falling apart in front of her as she sat helpless. Her voice was low and menacing as she snarled, "You're making a mistake. Do you consider this a victory? You will not succeed. You will destroy everything your grandfather built." I carefully leaned forward while maintaining eye contact and allowing my lips to curl into a serene, perceptive grin. I replied, "I suppose we'll see." And I wasn't just the girl they didn't think I would be, I was the heir they didn't anticipate. The silence that followed was both deafeningly quiet and tense, akin to standing in the midst of a storm. Despite his posturing, Richard was unable to stop his hands from fidgeting, and my mother's neatly manicured face was starting to break. "This isn't logical," my mom whispered. "Dad would never treat me like this." She said, "I was his daughter, his only daughter." Her voice wavered, not out of sadness but more in shock, from pride being hurt in a way she didn't anticipate. I turned to face the attorney. Was there a reason for this? As though anticipating the inquiry, the attorney nodded quietly. "Indeed. Mr. Whitmore left a sealed letter that should only be read in the event that his choice was contested." He took the envelope from within his briefcase. He gently opened it, breaking the wax seal, and then, using steady hands, unfurled the letter. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone, and by now, I'm sure your mother is furious," he said, reading aloud to his granddaughter Eva. A slight smile pulled at my mouth. "Grandpa sounded exactly like that. She'll accuse it of being unjust. She will assert that her destiny dictated everything. However, the reality is that she long since lost that privilege." My mother tensed across the room. She always thought she had a right to anything I created because she was my daughter. However, I've learned firsthand that accountability differs from entitlement. I gave her more chances than I ought to have. She opted for luxury above leadership. Selfishness rather than selflessness. Despite the remarks piercing the air like knives, The lawyer's voice stayed steady. And if Richard is present, I believe he's making an effort to appear calm, but I am aware of who he is, a leech. He took control of my daughter's bank account without any hesitation. I refused to give him control over my life's work. Richard remained silent despite his jaw clenching so firmly that I believed he may break a tooth. The attorney then turned to face me and went on to read, "You're different, Eva. You never made any requests. You worked, listened, and learnt. You viewed the business as a legacy rather than a bank account. And for that reason, I picked you." My heart was racing as I sat motionless. The lump in my throat was too strong for me to swallow. Grandpa had seen me all the times I doubted myself. Grandpa has seen me. The lawyer folded the letter and put it back in the envelope, adding, "He knew they'd try to come for it. He ensured that you wouldn't be left alone." There was silence once more, but it didn't last long. "This is ridiculous," my mother screamed. He was ill. He wasn't thinking clearly. The attorney gave her a direct look. He was in excellent health when he signed the will 3 months ago. It is enforceable and completely lawful. You cannot take any action. At that moment, Richard finally snapped. He got up so quickly that his chair scuffed the marble floor. He snarled, "This is a waste of time." "Margaret, hurry up. We're heading out." She did not, however, move. She simply sat there and gazed at me. Then she said, "Do you really think you can handle this?" In a tone that was colder than anything I had ever heard her say. I was not blinking. Yes. I meant it too. I didn't get much sleep that night. The enormity of what was ahead weighed heavy on my chest, not because I was terrified. I wasn't merely taking over a company. I was entering a conflict with two individuals who weren't going to back down. In the morning, I made my first appearance as Whitmore Global's new CEO in front of the company's imposing headquarters. As he had promised, my grandfather's top advisors were already waiting inside. Grandpa had anticipated this and constructed the safety measures I would require, so I reassured myself that I wasn't alone. However, I heard her voice as soon as I got close to the glass entrance. "Eva." Slowly, I turned. A few paces away, wearing her go-to designer coat, my mother stood with an incomprehensible face. Richard, beside her, loosened his tie artificially. Her voice was surprisingly calm as she stated, "We need to talk." "Only the three of us," Richard hastily added. "No board, no solicitors, only family." Empty and insincere, that final statement hung awkwardly between us. I took a close look at them. This wasn't about family, as I already understood. This was their ultimate, desperate attempt to seize control. Nevertheless, I was curious to find out how far they would go. After a pause, I said, "Okay, 5 minutes." We found ourselves in a private conference room that was nestled onto the building's edge. Richard leaned back in the chair as if he already belonged there. My mother was still standing with her arms crossed and her heels tapping lightly on the shiny floor. "Eva," she uttered in a gentle, almost maternal tone, "you're overstepping your boundaries. Grandpa placed an unachievable burden on your shoulders. You're not old enough, too inexperienced." "That's not fair to you." I arched an eyebrow. "Unfair to me? Or bothersome for you?" She disregarded the insult. With a tinge of frustration, she stated, "We're just trying to help you. Let Richard manage the business. However, this is only temporary. He's been there before. He can teach you things." I chuckled a little. "Oh, so that's what this is. Let him take charge while I act like a kid and sit in the corner." Like a patient tutor, Richard leaned forward and interlaced his fingers. "Consider it a collaboration," he replied with ease. "You retain the title. You go to the events. However, I manage the operations. The pressure is not yours to bear." I squinted. "You want me to serve as a symbol." He grinned as though I had finally caught up. "Exactly. You'll still have plenty of money. We'll set up a payment each month. You can travel, unwind, and take pleasure in life." "What occurs if I decline?" I inquired, knowing the answer beforehand. My mom's mask fell off. "After that, you'll be standing alone against a board that doesn't trust you, and shareholders waiting to exploit your first mistake." Now her voice was cold. The covert threats had vanished. It was open combat. I leaned back in my chair and replied, "So you're saying I'll be sabotaged?" They both admitted it. I stood slowly, allowing the space to absorb the weight of my choice. I said, my voice level. Thanks for the offer. I'll take my chances, though. As I turned to go, my mother's hand suddenly reached out and clamped down on my wrist, forcing its claws into my flesh. Are you sure you can win this? She growled. You are unaware of the brutality of this world. Your grandfather singled you out, so he did you no favors. Calm and unflinching, I met her gaze. No, Mother. When you made the decision to turn on me, you did that. Leaving their plans, their manipulation, and their desperation behind, I freed my wrist and left. I no longer felt scared. I was ready. As the CEO of Whitmore Global, I attended my first formal board meeting 2 days later. Nothing could have prepared me for the well-planned assault that awaited me behind those gleaming doors, even though I knew it wouldn't be simple. The air was different when I entered the boardroom. Heavy, tense. 12 men and women, most in their 50s and 60s, surrounded a long mahogany table. For decades, many had been faithful to my grandfather, but when power changed, allegiance was erratic. The skepticism on their faces was palpable. Listen to it in the quiet. Mr. Callahan, a senior board member, leaned forward and steepled his fingers before I could say anything. I think we need to address the situation before we move forward, he stated in a rigid tone. I maintained my composure. Exactly what circumstance are we discussing here? Callahan looked at a couple of people. Your grandfather was well liked, Eva, but let's face it, it's risky to give the reins to someone who hasn't worked as an executive. Additionally, the media is already portraying this as an error. Under the table, my phone buzzed. When I carefully took it out, I noticed the headline flickering over my screen. Hazard or heiress? The new CEO of Whitmore Global causes investor panic without a response. I closed the screen. My pulse, however, accelerated inside. This was no coincidence. Someone had leaked the story to the press. Before I had a chance to prove myself, someone wanted the world to view me as a failure. I got another notice, this time from internal HR, before the meeting was over. They had asked for a leadership vote. Before I had even started, they were attempting to take me away, and I was already aware of the culprit. I closed the door behind me as I proceeded directly from the boardroom into my office. As I took out my phone and dialed the one person who could still be on my side, my fingers shook a little. Before I heard his steady, assured voice, it rang twice. He said, I wanted to know when you would call. Lucas, I said, they're attempting to eject me. I require assistance. My grandfather's oldest and most reliable business associate was Lucas Ashford. Lucas Ashford, a financial wizard, was responsible for building half of the Whitmore business in a covert manner. Above all, he was a man who had never placed trust in either Richard or my mother. He didn't think twice. Send me everything. This includes the vote request, names, and media disclosures. We'll play smarter if they're playing dirtier. We met at his glass-walled office with a view of the city skyline that evening. Lucas gave me a direct glance while laying a folder across the table. He declared, We're going to turn this around, but you have to give it your best. Don't be afraid. Don't second-guess yourself. Are you prepared? I gave a nod. Never have I been more prepared. The story had already started to change by the following morning. The media reacted after Lucas engaged all of his connections, including devoted board members, past investors, and public relations specialists. I told my experience, my vision for Whitmore Global, and the legacy my grandfather left me in an exclusive interview that appeared on national business news. Overnight, the headlines changed. Young CEO responds, Ava Whitmore seizes the initiative with audacious vision. After the sabotage scandal, investors unite in support of Whitmore heiress, and the most crucial of all, the smear campaign was leaked by who? Everyone is watching the former executives. Whitmore Global stock had leveled down before midday. It started to climb by evening, however, Richard and my mum weren't done yet. I stood outside Whitmore Tower, gazing up at the glass monolith I now owned. On the morning of the board vote, there were still a few strong men in the building who thought they could determine my future. I entered the main doors with a sense of tranquility that I hadn't previously experienced. When I got there, the boardroom was already packed. Everyone was seated. Silent but steady, Lucas sat next to me. The double doors opened just in time for the start of the meeting. As if nothing had happened, Richard and my mother walked in with poise and polish. Taking center stage, Richard grinned, as though he already owned the floor. "Let's be honest," he said with ease. "It takes actual experience to head a multinational firm. For this reason, I offer a solution. Eva will continue to serve as the public face while I take over as CEO." He surveyed the room, seemingly certain of his decision. Then I got up. I gently remarked, "That's interesting because I remember Richard saying something very different in private." His grin wavered. Lucas slid a folder down the table. Containing emails, transcripts, and a comprehensive analysis linking the media leaks to Richard's personal email account. The space moved. Eyes squinted. Mouths clenched. "This is ridiculous!" Richard yelled. "You can't demonstrate!" I interrupted him. "We are able to." And we did. My mom sprang to her feet and raised her voice. "Enough, Eva! You're just trying to make us look terrible, and this is a circus." Unfazed, I gazed at her. "Mom, I don't have to bring you into disrepute. You two did that." Mr. Callahan pounded the table with his hand. "That's sufficient," he stated firmly. "You weren't trying to lead this company," she said, turning to Richard. "You attempted to bleed it." He surveyed the area. "Let's cast our votes." Every hand in the room raised, one by one for me. Everyone agreed with the decision. They led Richard out of the building, red-faced and defeated. My mother trailed behind. "You'll regret this," she growled as she walked by me. I didn't answer. My sole regret was that I had ever trusted them in the first place. After a year, everything was different. At the annual Whitmore Global Summit, I stood on stage and looked out at a group of media representatives, employees, and shareholders. Whitmore Global, the next chapter was written on a huge screen behind me. I said, "My name is Eva Whitmore, and a year ago, a lot of people thought I was too young and inexperienced to be in charge of this organization. They said I would fail and referred to my fortune as a gamble." A few people in the audience nod and smile, but they undervalued vision, resiliency, and legacy, things far more potent than experience. The crowd exploded in cheers. I had guided the business through its most tumultuous period. We modernized important divisions, started 2 sustainability projects, and entered new international markets with Lucas by my side and a group of visionary leaders. In addition to stabilizing, Whitmore Global was flourishing, but I had achieved more than just success. I had gotten a letter that morning in a handwriting I was all too familiar with, my mom's. It was brief, tense, and full of unspoken things. Without using the term, "I apologize." Express regret without acknowledging responsibility. I didn't respond. I haven't responded yet. Some wounds take a long time to heal. I returned to my workplace, enjoying the view of the city from the top. As the sun went down, a gentle orange glow glittered across the skyline. I went to the window and poured a glass of sparkling water. The final letter Grandpa ever wrote me, the one the lawyer read a year ago, was in a frame on my desk. Despite having committed every word to memory, I kept it there as a reminder that my selection wasn't based on convenience. I earned the privilege of being selected. I had made a foundation out of treachery, convert uncertainty into resolve. I incorporate a legacy into everything I do in life. The wind outside changed, bringing with it a feeling of clarity and transformation. And I knew I was prepared for whatever came next. I became more than just my grandfather's granddaughter. My name was Eva Whitmore, and my empire was like this.